All right, welcome back everyone. So in this video, Lee is going to kick off session 2 of his R&D experience with terrain or a new terrain system with doing a little bit of project cleanup. I just want to remind everybody here at the very beginning of this video that again, these are R&D videos that are recorded in a relaxed style that I'm going to start promoting for the 3D Buzz MMO videos, where if anything gets screwed up or goofy happens, we just keep rolling with it, and our dialogue will also be of a more relaxed nature than normal, for the simple fact that this is not a standard lecture VTM video. So just please keep that in mind. All right, Lee, so with that, project cleanup. What the heck do you want to clean up and why?
Okay, well, mostly because we're expanding upon the original R&D, and because the first session had no knowledge of where I was taking the project from that point forward,
So true.
there are things that have changed. There were a couple of things that I noticed that weren't consistent with the naming convention that I should have been using, so I need to go back and fix that as well. There are also some things in there that were temporary, and they were there just so we could get a visual representation of what things could look like, but they're not needed, so we need to get rid of them, and that's where I want to start.
All right.
So inside of our code base under demos, there are two files here that you may have recognized. There's Perlin and Terrain Generator. I said I was not going to go into those because they were very rough code, and they were there just for demonstration purposes. We
Mm-hmm.
weren't going to need or use those, so we weren't going to go into them right now. Reason why I didn't want to waste all that time is, like I said, they're temporary. We're deleting them. We don't need those anymore. So don't worry. If you didn't get to see it, doesn't matter. Didn't waste any time learning stuff that we don't need.
Right.
So,
Yeah. Let's go ahead and rebuild. That's not a bad idea there, or
yep.
resync it.
Yep, so now that I've removed some of the files, I want to resync just to make sure when I go to open up Visual Studio, we're going to be able to see those updates inside Visual Studio.
Yeah, basically so that your solution file is back in sync with the file structure here in our
Right.
project.
And then the very first thing that we'll do after that is go look at cleaning up these errors, because there's things it's looking for that don't exist anymore. So let's go ahead and open up Visual Studio, give it a sec. Hopefully it'll open up on this window, because if it doesn't, I won't be able to see it. All right, so as you can see, we've got some things that are just missing. So we don't need them. So let's go ahead and delete this. We'll scroll down to about here. These are no longer needed. And you'll have to forgive me, I'm going to be dealing with lag over this, so my typing is going to be probably even slower and more abysmal than it normally is.
Don't worry about it. Everybody's gotten used to Nelson doing this for quite a while now.
Yeah, but Nelson, works at 800 million miles a second, so it's probably human speed by the time they see it with lag. All right, so I'm just going to set the heights down to 0. And go ahead and build, see if I've gotten all the stuff out from there. I have, which is good. Now let's look at the train demo file real quick. I also don't want to be drawing multiple patches anymore. I only want one for now. So I'm going to delete this. Also don't need this debug anymore. And because I don't have a loop, we only want the first patch to begin at the beginning. Now, patch size and patch spacing for now I'm going to leave here. Jump back over to the train patch. Now there's a couple of things that I said that I need to name. I have private fields, and I capitalized them. So I just want to fix this just for consistency. It was driving me crazy when I got home and saw it, so I had to fix it. All right, so build, make sure there's no errors. Now, let's jump back over, and if you could go ahead and run and make sure that works still.
All right. So
And
we
we
should
get-
be coming in with a single patch that's flat because you've set our height to 0, and yeah,
Right. And it comes in much faster.
and it comes in much faster. And hey, it's a flat world. Okay. So let's go ahead and jump out of that. There you go.
All right, cool. Thank you. Now, let's start changing some stuff around. I didn't want to do that. I wanted to click over here. All right. Now, I have some certain things that I'm doing mostly in the constructor where I'm taking in a size and spacing.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I don't want this to be variable between patches, so there's no real point in bringing these in here. And they're also set here. So what I want to do is take these guys, get rid of them here, bring them up to the top, paste them again, but I want to make them private constants. Now these are a bit of magic numbers for now, but we'll get into why they're magic numbers in a little bit. And it helps with an equal sign. And we'll leave max height alone for now. That also changes our constructor, so we only need to take in a position. Ooh, that didn't work right.
I'll just throw a closing parentheses in there.
Yeah. Without the semicolon.
Yeah.
Which means I'm going to close this. I don't need the reference. I don't need no instructions. So hopefully that stops at the end of G.
Yeah, you're good.
So that also means that patch size and patch spacing can go away here. Now, we have a terrain patch here that I'm memorizing. I don't need this either. So I'm going to get rid of this. But I do want to be able to keep track of patches. Now, what we're going to be getting into is shortly is going to be implementing a mechanism of which we can instantiate new patches in the direction that we're moving and remove patches from the direction that we just left. To do that, we need to know what patches are in existence in the world. So what we should do is set up some way of saving that information. So what I'm going to do is create a public static list of type terrain patch. And I'm going to name it patches. And give it a setter and getter. So that will hold all of our patches. But right now it won't hold anything until I tell it what to hold. So let's go ahead and go here, delete that because we're no longer needing to set it. But at the bottom, after we set our patch, we need to tell patches to add this. So that will add our patch to our list. So we've got a record of what our patch is. Also our magic number, I messed up. That should be 49. 144 is the overall meters of our patch at the end. something, look, green.
I see. Shocking.
There's a reason for this. Is one of the ones that will bite you if you don't do it. You need to use a power of 2 and then add 1 to it. The reason why is in the last video we're talking about when you're making your mesh, we care about vertices, the number of vertices that make up that patch. While most people measure that patch in the size that it covers. So we want our patch to cover 48 meters, but that means it needs 49 vertices to make that patch happen. So that's why we're adding 1 to it. The power of 2 ensures that when we go to match up our patches side by side, the pattern aligns. If we use a non-power of 2 and it's a odd number, we could end up with patches that when they lie on the z-axis, the pattern won't match up.
Okay.
And if the pattern doesn't match when it goes to sample the height data, the trains will tear. So it has to be a power 2, and we've add 1 to it. That's what makes up these magic numbers. Now, the 144 that I typed in before, amazingly, is 3 times 48. That's where that comes from. Told you I'd get back to explain what the magic numbers were. This just came about from trial and error on the development machine that I'm working on for testing. These gave the best looking results with the fastest response time. That's how I
Gotcha.
dialed those numbers in. Now, let's see, that's got all of that. Build, make sure there's no errors still. Good, no errors. Now, there's a couple of other things that I want to do start off with. Let's close this down. Now, what I want to do is move some stuff around. We're not really going to be taking or creating new code yet, but I want to move where things are being done at. So this mesh object construction and adding the components and assigning these things, I want to move where all of this happens. So I'm going to take this code and I'm going to move it up here into the constructor. Likewise, I want to take the code here so these 2 lines of code, and copy those and move them up here as well. So what I want to do is when the patch is created, I want to be able to create all the mesh, its components, and assign all this information at the time the patch is constructed. The reason we're doing this now is these patches are going to be constructed on the fly. And if we were to ever want, for some reason, to come back in here and recreate the mesh, we don't want to recreate those pieces of information. So we're moving it out so those references are only created the very first time that train is done. And if we ever go in there, let's say if we wanted to sculpt on it or for some other reason modify that patch and requires us to run this particular method again, we wouldn't want those particular pieces of code to run a second time. So we're just cleaning things up. Other thing we want to do is make sure where that lines up is I want to move all this stuff out into its own method as well. So I'm going to select all this, Control RM. Oh, different shortcut. Apparently Nelson's changed his from the way mine does. So I'm going to create a method called update mesh.
Up, up,
Not,
back up. Just
I
there
see
you
it.
go.
So going, I saw it, but thanks for pointing it out.
hmm
It's not like I've ever missed anything before. All right. So we're going to go ahead and break this out into its own part. And then I also don't want the update mesh to call from here yet. So I'm going to bring this out and drop it up here. Now, what else have I changed? I'm going back and checking my notes. So some of the other things that I need to do, like this index is not needed. We won't need this temporary code anymore. But because we have the potential to run these multiple times now, we need to do a little additional cleanup. Particularly, we need to deal with our list of vertices. So I want to clear it. I also want to do the same thing with UVs. Now, the reason we want to do this is if for some reason we've already created the patch and we go back and we recreate the grid, we don't want to continue adding vertices and UVs to the end of the list. We want to start with a fresh list. Otherwise, the results you'll get will be less than desirable. They'll look very interesting though, that's for sure. All right, now in the create mesh, we need to do something similar. We need to do the triangles at this point, if I can spell it right. And the reason why we're breaking it up this way, as opposed to clearing them all in one spot, is it is possible to recreate the mesh without having to recreate the grid. So inside of the mesh, we're just restructuring all the triangles. So if for some reason I wanted to recreate the triangle information, but I didn't want to recreate the underlying grid, this gives me the ability of just flushing or clearing the triangle list when I create the mesh, and this will clear the vertices in the UV list while I'm recreating the grid. Not absolutely necessary, but it gives you the added flexibility if you need to do that at some point in time.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So that breaks all of that out. Let's go ahead and build it. And jump back over. If you could run that for me, sir, and make sure it still works.
You bet.
Uh-oh.
Dun-dun-dun.
It broke.
It did.
So what broke? Oh, I know exactly what it is. I don't even have to look. I hit the wrong button.
It's all good. There you go.
Do you know what it is? It's the list. I use my list patches as a property instead of a field, and I never initialized it. So inside of here, before we do anything with it, we'll have to initialize that list. So it has to happen before we get into adding the patch. So what we'll do is if patches is equal to null, we'll initialize it. No, how about an equal sign instead?
Now, if I was jotting some stuff down, if I'm missing out on something, my apologies. Now, this is it's an instanced field, right? Patches?
This one? No, patches is static.
Okay. Where the heck is patches?
Patches is up here.
Oh, there we
Because
go. Okay,
patches
good,
is a
good.
list of all my patches, and I only want one list of all my patches. I don't
Right,
want every single patch to have a list of every other patch.
right.
So by making it static, I only get one. But that's why I'm doing a check here to make sure it's null, because
Yeah,
I also
absolutely.
don't want
No,
to
I
create
was.
a new list every. Well, I
No,
know
of
I'm
course not.
explaining it for them.
Oh no, it's me. Cause I wasn't 100% tuned in. I was jotting something down as a note, and the way you had this a second ago was like right there. And so, quick glance up here at list. I didn't see static anywhere, and I was like, well, huh, wait a minute. Oh, okay, I'm with you. Just letting you know what I was thinking.
Right. I'm just going to move this up to the top of the constructor too. That way I'll just keep all the initialization stuff up here. That way it matches my notes as well.
Okay.
So let's go ahead and try that. And if you want to
Now,
switch over and run that,
how upset did we make Unity a second ago?
well, hopefully not too bad. It's still running, so it should be able to end and play again.
Um,
Is it really mad?
yeah, it's pretty mad.
Wow.
It's like I don't like you no more.
Try Control P and see if it'll pause it. Nope, definitely not happy.
No, it's
Have to restart it.
wait. Nope, got out. Okay. No, it's still pretty unhappy. Hang on one second.
Yeah.
Let me see if I can. Oh, wow. Yeah, lagging. Oh, wow. You see, are you able to see that? The mouse click is off by, I click down here and it clicks up by a little ways. Which means if I want to hit play, maybe if I click like right here.
Right?
Up, But
Wow.
yeah, that's weird.
Well,
But
that's okay because we're at the end of the cleanup stage.
yeah, no,
So I just wanted to make sure all the cleanup stuff worked and we could still get into the world and everything's working right.
yeah.
So that part's good. So what we can do is wrap up this video, and then when we come back and we can close all this stuff down, get it working again, then we can come back and look at switching up the terrain tiles so the pivot points are in the center of the tile
Okay.
as opposed to one of the corners.
Okay, awesome. Well, with that, that's going to wrap up this video. Thanks a lot.